This is Tony from Historic American Homes. This is the first in a three-part video series where we're going to recreate the cottage you see in the image on the screen here. So recently in the Facebook group that I manage for historic homes, one of the members posted that image. Here's the group, and you'll find a link to the Facebook group in the description. One of the members posted the image we were just looking at, and he said he couldn't find any floor plans to go with it and wondered how one might go about making floor plans to fit this beautiful house. So I thought that would be a fun project, and that's what we're going to do in these three videos. The design is by Ralph Adams Cram. Ralph Adams Cram was a very successful architect from the turn of the 1900s. I think he lived from 1863 to 1942. And he specialized in Gothic and Tudor style architecture. Most of his work was churches and college campuses where that style was so popular, and he did some houses along the way. So the image we saw was published in Ladies' Home Journal, but unfortunately no floor plan. So we're going to create a floor plan, but here are a few pictures of Cram's work and a few pictures of Cram. You can find his full biography on Wikipedia. I'm going to be building a model in SketchUp, and I'm going to be using that in order to create the floor plan. So I'm going to be doing this video in terms of how I'm creating the SketchUp model. That's going to be in three parts. In this first video, I'll just be recreating the overall massing of the house, getting the shape right from the outside. In the second video, I'll develop that into floor plans. And in the third, I'll look at a few of the key exterior details that are so distinctive for this house. First thing we're going to notice here is you'll see these little green tick marks that I put in the middle of the screen. I want to get the floor of the house relative to the ground outside. I want to establish that first, because the way the house is set on the ground is a very important part of the way this house presents itself. We've got the ground surface, we've got 3 steps up, a kind of terrace, another 2 steps up, a porch, and then finally a step up into the front door here. So that's 6 steps up in all. These are outdoor steps, so probably they're about 6 inches high. Typically stairs inside a house are between 7 and 7 3/4 inches, but a stair in a landscape is typically closer to 6. So I'm going to assume 6 inches, which puts the floor of the house inside 3 feet, 6 times 6 inches above the ground surface outside. So that's one reference we're going to use. The next thing we're going to do is try to get a sense of the overall size of the house in plan. So here by this window, I've drawn 3 red lines to indicate spacing. These windows appear to me to be roughly 2 feet wide. There's a set of small windows here and up here and a narrow window here. Those are a little bit different than the other windows, but the main groups of windows look like they're 2 feet wide. So on that basis, I'm going to make some estimates at dimensions. We've got 3 windows here, so that's 6 feet. If we look at the space on each side, it's a little wider than a window, but not say twice as wide. So I'm going to guess it's 3 feet on each side. That would make 3 and 6 and 3. That would make this gable 12 feet wide. On the far right, we have the gable with 4 windows, so that there would be 8 feet wide. And then again, it looks like it's about 3 feet on each side, so that would make that 14 feet wide. So I've got the widths of the 2 gables. Then if we go back to the left, we've got the gable, and then it steps back, and then there's a wall section here that appears to be similar to the gable itself, although maybe slightly wider. So I'm going to assume that's 4 feet. And here, the opening for the porch looks like it's 4 chunks wide here, 4 units wide. We've got a window up above that would be, if these windows are 2 feet wide, that would be about 6 feet wide, and these beams line up, so that makes this part 6 feet. So 6 feet, another 3, and another 3. That makes the porch about 12 feet wide. Continuing to the right, we've got another section of wall, which appears to be at first glance the same as this one, which I said was 4 feet. But looking more closely, we see that we're not seeing part of it because of the corner of the house, the corner of this gable obscuring it. So I'm going to assume that's 6 feet wide. And then finally this 14-foot wide gable. So adding it all up, starting from the left, we have 12 plus 4 plus 12 plus 6 plus 14. That makes the width of the house 48 feet. The depth, well, I can't say for sure. It's hard enough to see what's going on the right side here, but it's going to be less than that, considerably less, because we can see from the shape of the roof that the house is wider than it is deep. If you look at the hipped roof, it has a ridge running parallel to the front of the house. That means that it's not as deep as it is wide. So we'll make some assumptions and fiddle with that until we get it right in the model. Last thing we're going to look at is the roof. So what we see at first glance, it looks like we're looking at a 2-story house. But if you notice on the right, the roof comes all the way down to the top of the first floor. And then it appears to wrap around the back. We've got a little glimpse of that as sort of a back porch going on the far right there. And then if we look over at the left, it's the same thing. If we follow this roof line, it seems to actually continue down to the top of the first floor. So it looks like if we could see the left side and the back side, we actually have a roof that comes down to the top of the first floor. It's really a single-story house with a lot of roof. And then what they've done is they've kind of sliced away the front part of all of that and exposed the second floor to bring in some windows. So I'm going to start by building a mass that's single-story with a large roof and then cut away, just like I described it. The last thing I want to mention is the roof slope. If we look at one of these gables, typically a roof slope is laid out in carpentry by using a carpenter's square. Here are a bunch of carpenter's squares. There are a few varieties, but the main one, the typical one used for roofing, looks like the one we see in this picture here. I'm going to bring up a closer view. We can see the square here. It's just an L shape, and it has the inches marked along each line. So there's a picture of it again. So the way a carpenter's square is typically used for roofing is you establish the horizontal, let's go back to our image, the horizontal distance is set at 12 inches, and then depending on the slope, the vertical number varies. So like this roof slope is very steep, so the horizontal is 12 inches. The height, my estimate from the image is that the height is about 14 inches. So for every 12 inches horizontal, the roof is rising 14 inches. That's quite steep, and that's not typically used on houses these days. But it was frequently used in the turn of the 1900s for this sort of cottage style effect. Nowadays, houses typically have roof slopes that are fairly low, like 4 inches of rise for a 12-inch run, or 6 or 8. Anyway, we're going to go with 14. I played with it a little bit in the model, and that seems to be pretty close to what's there. And it was also a figure that was commonly used at that time, 14 and 15. I looked at 15 as well, and 15 was a bit too steep compared to this picture. So that's what we're going to use, 14, 12 for the roof slope. Now we're going to shift over to the model itself, and I'll show you the bare bones, the basics at this point. So we're in SketchUp now. For those of you who aren't familiar with SketchUp, there are plenty of good video tutorials available on YouTube for SketchUp by other channels. I've done a few small ones myself, but it's not the focus of my channel. So I'll put a link to one of those channels in the description. I'm not going to get into how to use SketchUp in this video, but I'm going to show you the model in SketchUp that I'm working with. First thing I did was I just created a ground surface. This is the outside, the outdoors, the ground level, the lawn, etc. And then I made a rectangular block, which is the start for our first floor, and I extruded that up to be 3 feet deep. So if we look, that's 3 feet high there. I made it 48 feet wide. If you look at the cursor, you'll see 48. And I made it, for now, 32 feet deep. And that's just our starting point. We're going to adjust this as we develop the mass in more detail. After I did that, I made a first floor walls. So this block here is going to become our walls eventually. And for the purpose of this exercise, I'm going to be using some basic standard dimensions. We can't get detailed dimensions off of this image here. It's just impossible to measure it with this kind of precision. So I'm going to use contemporary standard construction dimensions. And I'm going to try to stick to 1 or 2 foot increments for the floor plan. And then the ceiling height, if we're looking at the floor level is approximately where I'm moving the mouse. And then we've got a windowsill, top of the window, some beams up here. In the porch we see a door, faintly outline of a door. We can see there's not a lot of space above the door to the ceiling of the porch. So I'm assuming this house has an 8-foot ceiling on the ground floor, based on that door and based on the window. So in the model, I've used what is standard construction height in the United States now, 8 foot 1 1/8 inches. And that's just a number that comes from what is standard carpentry practice these days for an 8-foot ceiling. So although I'm calling it an 8-foot ceiling, it's actually 8 foot 1 1/8. Okay, so now we have our first floor, and then we're going to add a second floor on top of that. There's going to be some floor framing. I've assumed nominal 12-inch deep joists with a plywood floor deck and base the thickness on that, again using standard materials. Now the next step here, I'm going to put walls on top of that second floor. And again, I've made it 8 foot 1 1/8 high. Now this is going to get radically changed as we develop the model. This was just in order to give me a sense of the height of the 2-story part that's visible in front, and a beginning of a sense of the volume that's available inside the roof. Because what's going to happen is this second floor walls is going to get carved away by our roof. Now I'll turn the walls off, and I'll turn the roof on. And I want to bring your attention first to the bit on the left here. This is just a simple flat rectangle, and then what I've done is I've drawn lines at 45-degree angles. I'm going to come down here and you can see it better from above. So these lines are at 45 degrees. Now this is a hipped roof, and if the slopes of the hip are all the same, then you'll get these hips on the roof at a 45-degree angle when seen in plan. If the roof slopes were different, that angle would be different, and you'd have to calculate it, but we don't have to deal with that problem in this model. So I created this rectangle, and then I lifted the ridge according to our roof slope of 14 and 12 to create the roof massing. I also gave it a thickness at the base of 1 foot 1 inch, which is dependent on the way the roof is framed. I happen to know how I want to frame this roof, and again, if I get into that kind of detail, it'll be in a later video. But anyway, you need some thickness there, so I used 1 foot 1 inch. And that gives us the basic outline of our main roof shape. Now I'm going to turn the second floor walls back on, and we see that there's a bunch of weird stuff sticking out. So it's interesting to know, and we will fiddle with this more, the distance from this edge to where it intersects the roof. And as it happens, it's almost exactly 6 feet. 6 feet and 1/8 of an inch. So what we're going to do next is start carving away at this second floor wall here to bring it in line with the roof. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and do that and fiddle with it, and I'm not going to narrate, and then I'll speed up this portion of the video a little bit, and that'll save you all a little time. Okay, so that second floor walls, that's still inside there, and you can see the hint of it with this line here. So I pushed it in 6 feet on all 4 sides. Turn the roof off for a moment. So that's really the full height of the second floor that's available to us. Now that's an 8-foot ceiling, and those rooms upstairs, they're going to be bedrooms. Um, they can have lower sections of ceiling than that, so eventually it'll come out a little more. But those will be sloped ceilings, and they'll come down. I have found that generally 5 feet at the 5-foot wall height works pretty well for like an attic bedroom. You can put the headboard of a bed up against the wall, and you can sit up in bed without a problem. So 5 feet works nicely. It's also okay for like the back wall of a closet. Occasionally I'll go down to 4 feet, but if it's a small room, like a small child's bedroom or something. So those are just some ideas on attic bedrooms. So that's the second floor, and now we'll take a look at our picture again. So what we see on the right up on the roof is that on the second floor, they've created a large dormer. And that dormer is obviously giving a bunch of more headroom to a room on that side of the house. And then we've also got 2 chimneys. And if we look at, let me turn these red lines off. If we look at the chimney on the right here, we see that the dormer is centered on the chimney. The ridge of the dormer runs into the face of the chimney, and the chimney itself appears to be pretty much in line with the ridge of the house. So turn the roof on. Our chimney is going to be somewhere in here coming up in line with the ridge of the house, and there's going to be a dormer coming out on this side. I am going to assume that there's a similar dormer on this side. We don't see it in the image, but we do see another chimney. So I'm going to assume it's going to be the same arrangement on this side as well. And that's kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I'll go ahead and draw a guideline in here. So that's the center line of our ridge. I'm going to turn off the roof, and let's see, we have, having pushed that upper floor in 6 feet, it's now 20 feet wide. I'm going to pull out a section and basically outline this dormer a little bit. It's hard to say how deep it goes, but it's a fairly wide dormer. It's not a small dormer. It looks like there are probably 2 separate windows in here. It's hard to make out, maybe 3. I'm going to make it, for now, 10 feet wide. So that's 5 feet on that side, 5 feet on that side. And for the moment, I'll just bring it flush. It's going to be something like that. And then we're going to have the same on the other side. So now you can begin to see the dormer there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of like slice off the front of that mass in the SketchUp model so that we can get the second floor exposed on the front. For the moment, I'm not worrying about these gables at all. We'll add those in after. So I'm going to go into the model and I'm going to slice away the front roof until we've got the second floor exposed. So I've sliced away the 6 feet of the roof in front, and so now we can see our upper floor there, and the roof down each side. Now I need to make the equivalent adjustment to the floor, the second floor itself, and to the first floor walls, and to the first floor. And that is the basic thing that's happening with this front wall. Now there's more to do still, and we'll do that next. We've got a porch to create, and we've got these gables to create, and a gable up on top, and we've got to finish this dormer and chimneys. I'll go ahead and do these 2 gables on either side. We decided they were 12 feet wide and 14 feet wide. As far as how much they project, it looks to me like it's about 2 feet. this little side of this gable on the left here, looks like it's approximately the same as one of our windows. I'm gonna assume the one on the right projects the same amount. I'm not exactly sure that it does. It might project out a little bit more. Hard to say from the drawing. But I'll make it the same for now, and we can adjust it later if we decide we want to. So that's sticking out 2 feet, and it's 12 feet wide. Same on the other side, but 14 feet wide. Do the same with the walls. And let's do the porch while we're on this part of the house. I think we said that was 12 feet wide for the porch, and it starts 4 feet from this corner. So I'll make a copy of this 4 feet over, and then again 12 feet over. And how far back should we go? It looks like there's a door. There's maybe 1.5 feet to the left of the door, and maybe 3 feet to the right. 4.5 feet, and a door 7.5 feet. We'll make it 8 feet deep. And so that gives us the porch. I'm going to get this thing out of the way. I don't need it anymore. In case you're wondering what this little triangle is here, that's a 12 by 14 triangle, and I used that when I was laying out the roof slopes. I'm just going to keep it for reference for the time being, but I'll delete it eventually. So we have the walls for those 2 projecting gables, and we have the porch. Now let's take a look. Got some little gables. They are continuous with the roof slope. They're part of the same slope on each side of the roof. I'm going to assume the one on the left is the same as the one on the right in terms of roof slope. I don't see why it would be any different. These dashed lines are called guidelines, and they're not real physical lines in the model. They're just temporary lines that are helpful for laying things out. And then I get rid of them when I'm done with them. So what I want to do is build up a triangle, the face of the gable itself, that aligns with the roof, with the line of the roof. And the gable is symmetrical, so it's going to be centered on this vertical guideline I just created. Alright, so we've got the beginning of the outlines of these gables. We're going to have a similar gable on the front of this dormer here. There's going to be a gable here, and then eventually 2 chimneys. I think I'll try copying this one over. It's too big, but we can manage that. I'm not sure that we need all this depth for the roof framing on the gable. I haven't thought about that. I'm gonna just lower it for the time being by 6 inches. Again, there's room for plenty of opportunity to fine-tune all this as we get further along. In fact, we'll most definitely be doing that anyway. We're going to need a chimney. We're going to need entire chimney here. It's pretty sizable. Doesn't look square. It looks like the right-hand face is narrower than the front face. And based on these windows down here, it looks like that front face is probably about 4 feet wide. It's a pretty massive chimney. So I'm going to say 4 feet and 3 feet, and we'll see if that works for us. I'm just going to come over to the side here and draw a square, a rectangle that's 4 feet and 3 feet, and pull it up. So 32 feet, make it 34 feet. Okay, that's our chimney. It's going to go on the first floor, and it's going to be centered on the ridge of the house. So let's get it centered on the ridge here. So I'm going to move it over, move it in that direction till it lines up. Move it right to there for now. And then it's too far, of course. We're gonna fix that. See, there's some space between the chimney and the ridge, and it intersects the dormer roof. So let's just do this by eye. Try moving it over 4 feet and see how that looks. That looks pretty darn close. Let's see. It comes down and then it flattens out. Comes down and flattens out. I think I'm there within a few inches. So I'm going to copy it over. Let's see, that's 4 feet away. So I'm going to make a copy, bring it over this direction. Go an additional 4 feet. And then I need to make a copy of this guy over here. All right, the last thing I'm going to do here is that little front terrace. We've got some little walls that wrap around the upper terrace, some steps, a lower terrace with these little things to contain the steps. I'll put that in, and then I'll call it a day for this video. We'll deal with this little, what appears to be a back porch, as we start to work out ideas for the interior floor plan. looks like the last thing to do here is this topmost attic gable. I'd say it's pretty much the same size as this one here, which was 14 feet. So I'm going to start by just copying this one up here. To me, like we're off to a pretty good start here. There's some little bit of cleanup I'm going to have to do in the model, some small adjustments, but I think we've got a pretty good massing model that matches pretty closely the other picture. Now, I mentioned that at the beginning that I was going to be doing this with contemporary standard construction dimensions. I'm also going to be detailing it out using contemporary standard construction techniques. So what we're actually seeing here would be the house framing, the framing of the walls and the roof, not the exterior finishes. So all of that will get added on to the exterior of this, the overhangs, the stone, all of this detail is going to get added on to what we're seeing there. What we're seeing in the model at this point is basically the bones, the skeleton, and then all of this flesh will get added on afterwards. So that's why I didn't worry about things like the overhangs at this point. I will probably cover that in the third video. And in the next video, the second video, I'm going to take this massing model we've got and I'm going to be working out some floor plan ideas on that. So I hope you found this useful, and I hope you come back for the next couple of videos. Do subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment if you've got questions or ideas of your own. And I'll repeat that I'm working in SketchUp, and there are plenty of good SketchUp tutorials all over YouTube. I'll link to one channel in my description. Okay, have a great day. Thanks for stopping by.